just a couple of slides left. Um, to finish up the chapter, but like literally 2 slides. And then we'll be able to do the study guide. So, what is today? The 24th? Yeah. So, any questions from you guys before we jump into stuff? Okay. So, let's, I guess, just go ahead and do that. So this is where we ended with changes for rural America. And of course, slavery changing how things were done in the South. Let's see, where's my, there we go. Right where it needed to be. Of course, beginning in Virginia in 1676, and the Carolinas from the start, because, the whole Barbados thing. And with slave labor, the South was able to really concentrate on cash crops, tobacco, rice, indigo, etc. This also tied the plantations directly to global trade markets due to you can't really eat cash crops typically. I mean, rice, yeah, but even that, you have to refine to a certain degree. You can't just like eat rice off the stalk. And of course, laws were passed in the 1660s in Virginia, which we talked about already. This we didn't mention. Slavery was a status inherited through the mother. It could not be changed by converting to Christianity because, we already tried that with the Portuguese. And masters could kill their slaves for resisting their authority, which that gets adjusted as we move on. Things were a little different in the Carolinas initially. As we mentioned, taken from Barbados, initially to rear hogs, they gradually to growing rice because, again, coastal South Carolina, very marshy, very good for that sort of agriculture. Now, initially there was a degree of freedom because these were just like swamp plantations, and nobody wants to stay there. But also, if you're in a plantation in the middle of the swamp and there's nothing around for miles except for more swamp, where are you going to go? Because there's other stuff in that swamp that you don't want to be a part of. So, yeah, you were just kind of stuck there. Eventually, though, things did shift to essentially labor camps with patrolling, with light military patrols by the 1740s, which lead to other things, but we'll get to that later on. Quick question for the class. Why was slavery inherited through the mother, specifically? Like, why not through the father? Sort of. But there was a more devious reason for that. And it had to do with how these slave owners treated their slaves. Thomas Jefferson is famous for this. because oftentimes um, the slave master would do whatever he wanted with the female slaves, and they would become pregnant. And rather than have to deal with the child, they just be a slave. Yep. So there was a lot of that. Yeah, that was specifically put into law for that very reason. So here we have some lovely propaganda of, oh, look how happy everybody is. Nobody's getting beaten. Everybody, look how they've got water. They're able to have a nice little water break. Here's some kids making. Where's my damn mouse? Here's some kids making flower crowns or whatever. There's some dudes just hanging out talking. This guy's a farmer, so he's also working for sure. Totally not just making the slaves do the work. Yeah, totally fine. Everything's cool. This was a bit more true to life. The Virginia Planters Belt Tobacco, um, where you've got the pasty white plantation owner under this. This is like a very old type of parasol to keep him out of the sun while his workers have very little, if anything, on while they're doing the actual work. But, sorry, best tobacco, not belt tobacco. My brain fried there for a second. That's an S. And then the slave markets in Charleston. I don't want to spend too much time on this because I want to make sure we have time for the review. Obviously, nobody liked being enslaved. It tends to be pretty low on the scale of things people enjoy. So there are all sorts of ways to resist enslavement. The book goes into a bit more detail than I've got here. They challenged masters and overseers by refusing to work, breaking tools, feigning illness, and other means of disputing whites' authority. Some ran for freedom, others fought back in the face of punishment, and still others used arson, poison, or other means to defy their owners. A few planned revolts. So there was a lot of passive resistance where they pretend like they were sick so they couldn't work, or they would, air quotes, accidentally break tools just to slow down production, just to make things more difficult for the slave owners. Of course, though, the slave owners could punish them however they felt because they were owned property. This would lead to whipping, mutilation, branding, sometimes just straight up execution. The big fear, though, was not just resistance, but straight up revolt, or rebellion, I should say. And this did happen a couple of times, not as many as one would expect. So I've got a few here. These two aren't really important for our purposes, but a couple up in New York City where fires were set, and when the people came to stop them, they were attacked by enslaved Africans and natives. Although the second time there was a white couple involved, but as soon as they were caught, they were like, "Oh no, it was totally these Africans that made us do it." So yeah. The big one, though, for our purposes, is the Stoner Rebellion here in South Carolina in 1739. A group of enslaved men stole weapons from a shop, marched along the Stono River, collected more recruits, burned down plantations, and were eventually caught by the militia and pretty much all summarily executed. A few of them were captured and then also just executed without any kind of trial. I want to say a bunch of slaves were killed just like that had nothing to do with the Stunner Rebellion, just to make sure that slaves in other colonies knew to not knew to be afraid to try to rebel, because this is what would happen. Like, it was just, but that was the thing, was in the South, the plantation owners, well, which is to say really the whites in general, were outnumbered by the enslaved like 2 to 1. So if there was a really across the board uprising, they'd be out of luck. And then even the Spanish, which were of course right down there in Florida, offered freedom to any slave that managed to escape and get down to Florida. And obviously there were multiple wars between the Spanish and English, so anytime that happened, the southern plantation owners were really, really nervous that they were going to wake up the next day and have their plantation on fire and their slaves all escape to go down to Florida. Or just not wake up at all, because, you get shanked in your sleep, which, I mean, they deserve it. Anyway, here's some of the fires in New York, and the result of said fires, let's just burn people at the stake in the middle of town. Just burn them alive. Let's bring little Timmy to watch. This is how justice was done in colonial America. This is also what lynching looks like. We'll see more of this, really even into next semester. Anyway, here's the Stunner Rebellion. These guys, got together and marching down along the river, beating drums, and they had tools and weapons and whatnot, and burned down plantations and freed other slaves. For some reason, this image is the one I was able to find for the Stunner Rebellion, even though I've seen this also used for the Haiti Rebellion, which we'll talk more about later as well. But again, it's a big like propaganda piece of, oh no, look, they're murdering the women and children. It's like, bro, they have risen up from like 100 years of slavery. But also, it's like, oh, this kid's about to get freaking punted. Anyway, yeah, so the global changes affected the colonies, opportunity for the cities and the frontiers, but not so much for everybody else. And obviously the English economics are what mainly impacted the colonies, because that's the colonies we're really talking about, and also the Spanish and French colonies were not nearly as numerous. And of course, the way England set up its economy made it so that the colonies were essentially tooled for raw resources, which made it so that slave labor would be really incentivized to get as much material put out for as cheaply as possible, but also that they needed more land, so that meant native land, which caused yet more conflict. So those are like our two major issues at the moment. Well, native land, but also, land that, say, the French or Spanish have claimed. So we're not only pissing off the natives, but also the Spanish and French. But I mean, that's old hat for the English. Okay. Let's go ahead and get the study guide up. Where is my damn mouse? Alright. Now, when I switch this, it's going to be weird. So, duplicate. And that's going to go completely black. And we do this. And that's going to be weird. And we have to resize it. Okay. And back out. Alright. Apologies to any Apologies to my online students. I know that one was weird, but do what we can. All right, study guide. So what I'm going to do is, bless you, is go through the test basically, and you guys are going to do your best to answer. Oh, also, I already did this for my online students, but I decided to go ahead and put them up, well, this morning for you guys because I forgot yesterday. If you, most of you have your laptops with you. On Blackboard, I put what I call the online version of the PowerPoints up, which is to say I took all the images off, so you can review them easier. So there's in the content section of Blackboard after the study guide, there's just the 3 chapters again with like OL in parentheses after them. That's the online versions, and those are just the exact same thing, but I tossed all the images. So that's up there, FYI. Okay, so let's get started. Let me make sure. Unfortunately, this one isn't as in order as I usually have them. I don't know what I was. I know what I was doing. I was at the GE job here in Florence, and I did not have nearly the time or uninterrupted time that I did when I was doing this upstate. So, let's talk about early North America. What was the name of the land bridge between Siberia and Alaska that the original North American settlers crossed between 16,000 and 14,000 BCE? That's the Strait. Do you remember the name of the land bridge? This was multiple choice, so you would have gotten it just knowing this, the Bering Strait, but does anybody remember the name of the land bridge? It's related to the Bering Strait. You want to try? Good enough. Beringia. Yeah. Again, because it's just the Bering Strait, but with IA on the end. Yeah. Because it's where the Bering Strait is now. It was just covered in ice. Okie dokie. After settling down to Mexico around 1000 BCE, what form of early agriculture was developed? This is a very early form of agriculture. And in the notes I specified that they use like simple tools and farming techniques and whatnot. This is very early Mexico. This would be very early in the notes if you took this down. This would be before the big 3. Yes. It's a word you should have heard before. Yeah, horticulture. See, like I've heard it a bunch just in normal talk, but I've never like thought about what the definition was. I thought it was just like another kind of farming. I've never thought about what it meant beyond that. So I guess some people just do really simple farming. Maybe it's got a different definition today, like in modern definition. Okay. Yeah, that's it for that first part. Now on to the major civilizations. Not just the big 3, but a few others. So these are all going to be native tribes. So which of the 3 major Central/South American cultures built their capital Tenochtitlan in the region of modern-day Mexico City? So which of the big three was centered in where Mexico City is today? The Aztecs, yes. Because if you recall, they called themselves the Mexica, and that makes it very easy. All right. Which group settled around the Yucatan Peninsula in what is modern-day Guatemala? There was a sudden decline in their culture, and they slowly reemerged before the Europeans showed up. Yes, this was the Maya. Yeah, they weren't like a solid empire when the Spanish showed up. They were a bunch of little city-states. Which means, by process of elimination, which culture was down in the Andes Mountains of modern-day Peru? Its capital was Cusco, which was geographically centered in a in a fertile mountain valley. The Incas. Yeah, Incas, Peru, just keep that in mind. Mayans. All right. Now, that's the big three, but I've got a few more just around. So, let's go up to North America. The name of the native tribe in North America that famously made their homes out of masonry built into cliffs. The Pueblo. Good. Oop. If I spell it. Yeah. Let's see. Okay, this one isn't a tribe because we didn't get a name for the plains tribes, but this is talking about the plains tribes and I wanted to include it. So, what was the name of the spear throwing device that nomadic tribes on the plains used to hunt bison? The little throwing device. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, ATL, ATL. Yeah, I don't know. I'm assuming this is how it's pronounced. Again, these are all multiple choice. So the ones that are short answer, in my mind, are fairly simple ones. Okay. Heading west from there, what was the name of the tribe that settled along the Pacific coast, subsisted largely through fishing, which led to a very stable society? Yeah, Chumash. This is just a region in modern day California, like how we've got the PD here in South Carolina. It's just named after the tribe. So if you say Chumash, people in California is like, oh yeah, Southern California. Like by the coast. Okay, one more, I think. Yes, one more for this section. So heading much further east, what was the name of the huge collection of tribes along the Mississippi River which built vast burial mounds and earthworks? The Hopewell. Very good. Good, good, good. All right, well, that's it for that section. Let's go to Europe. Well, let's talk about some Europeans who went everywhere else. Since the first guy went to China. Well, European traveled to China in the 1270s and introduced Europe to many exotic ideas and goods. This one's a name that you've all heard a million times, but you probably never thought about. I sure as heck was surprised when I learned who this guy actually was. He traveled to China in the 1270s. Did a surprising amount of traveling, actually, to be that long ago. Which I guess that's like high Middle Ages. Yeah. European that traveled to China in the 1270s introduced Europe to many exotic ideas and goods. He's famous for traveling to China, and it's what got the Europeans hooked on this idea that they need to travel east to get all these exotic spices and whatnot. It's his fault. I swear you've heard this guy's name a bunch. You just wouldn't have connected with, oh yeah, famous explorer who went to China. M? Yep. Yeah, that's Marco Polo. Oh. Alright, we got quite a few, well, we've got a few with Portugal. Really just two, but, yeah, more than one. Who led Portugal in its endeavor to find a new route to India, now that land routes were untenable? So who was running Portugal when they started trying to find different ways to get to India? Yes. What was an alternate title for him? Yeah, Henry the Navigator. That said, again, this one's a multiple choice, and he's the only Henry on there, so you'd be fine. And who was the Portuguese explorer who rounded the southern tip of Africa and made it all the way to India before returning with exotic and expensive spices? He was the one who made it to the southern tip of Africa and proved that it was possible. But there was one guy that went further than him. I get those two mixed up all the time, so I get it. Yes. Good enough. His last name's easy. Yeah. Bartolomeu Diaz. Again, multiple choice. Okie dokie. And the setup for heading west. Just a couple of things here. Who's the European who modified Chinese woodblock printing to create Europe's first printing press? This is where things start getting out of order because I'm trying to keep them thematic. Made the printing press for Europeans. Uh-huh. It's very German. Yeah, Gutenberg. Johann Gutenberg. Okay, I spelled it with a U last time, and the thing got angry at me. Okay. One other thing here before we start heading to North America. What group of Europeans were the first to discover North America? What group of Europeans? Yeah. Nope. Columbus was working for the Spanish, so it was before him. They just didn't stick around. Mm-hmm. It was the Norse, or Vikings, however you want to put it. Yeah, Leif Erikson. Yep. Leif Erikson and Eric the Red only made it to Greenland, but then Leif Erikson made it the rest of the way. Yeah, yeah, they were serious sailors, man. They knew what they were doing. Okay, so let's talk about Spain, because there's a lot to talk about with Spain. First off, let's see. Yeah. Um, who's the Queen of Spain who actually authorized Christopher Columbus's expedition? Because I'm not going to ask you Christopher Columbus. Everybody knows Christopher Columbus. Let's instead ask who authorized his expedition. I narrowed it down for you. The Queen of Spain. There weren't very many queens of Spain we've talked about. Queen Isabella. Very good. I may have mentioned this, that it was around this time that the Queen in chess became the modern piece that she is today, where she can basically use every move besides the knight. It was likely due to Isabella. Um, Also setting off from Spain in 1519, in an attempt to circumnavigate the world, he failed, but at least one ship and 18 crew did make it back. Who was this explorer that tried to circumnavigate the globe? He was technically Portuguese, but he sailed for the Spanish crown. And I'll remember that he was Portuguese because of the video we watched. We watched the video. Magellan. Ferdinand Magellan, specifically, but Magellan's good enough. Right. Oh, so much Spanish stuff. What was the name of the Spanish conquistador who, through conquest and disease, destroyed the Aztecs? So who was the conquistador that destroyed the Aztecs? famous Spanish conquistadors? Oh, Vasquez. That's the guy that authorized him to go exploring. So you're in the right ballpark. No, that's later. But you're also in the right ballpark because they had the same first name. It was a very common first name in Spanish, apparently. I don't know exactly what I would translate to in English. At least for me, I don't know what it was in my childhood that made me think this, but like this last name always just sounded evil to me. I guess because I knew like what he did, but it always had sort of an evil connotation. So there's another Hernando. And he was authorized by Diego Velasquez. Diego de Velasquez, I should say. This would this would be back before Magellan, because I think Magellan was like later exploration. Oh no, Magellan is before this. Okay, so it's after Magellan and map making. Spanish conquistador who destroyed the Aztecs. Nobody? Yeah. No, that's the other Hernando. This is this guy came first. We'll talk about De Soto later. That's his cousin. So you've answered two of the three questions. This is the third guy, which technically this is the first guy. He conquered the Aztecs. They thought he was, well, they didn't really think that he claimed they thought he was a god and yada yada yada. They just weren't sure what to do with him. And then he spread smallpox and everybody died. Mexico City around himself, over top of the capital. It's not even a very big last name. Okay, we don't have time. Cortez. Oh, well, yeah, that's Cortez. Okay. Yeah, because of about my other classes we could go over, but we can't go over in this class because I got another one after you guys. This is the next guy, a Spanish conquistador who went out and conquered the Inca Empire. Yes. Francisco Pizarro. And finally, the Spanish explorer, technically, searched through Florida for a fountain of youth, only to fight natives and ended up wandering all the way to Texas. Yes. Hernando de Soto. I think we might have one more Spanish thing here. Yes, we do. What group of natives in western North America did the Spanish missionaries actually try to convert rather than wipe out? So this typically led to resistance because of, well, the Spanish. So there was a group of natives that the Spanish tried to convert rather than genocide in western North America. And it's a group we've already talked about. So you can use your analytical skills and narrow down the native tribes we've talked about that would exist in western North America. Or you could just remember the native tribe we talked about a bunch. This is the only one we talked about at the start and then also like in chapter 2. Well, let's just go up here real quick. Okay, here are the tribes we talked about. And this thing. So this one definitely isn't it, because that's just a thing. All right, which of these would they not be? Wouldn't be the Aztecs. Wouldn't be the Incas. Wouldn't be the Mayans, because they're gone too. They went with the Aztecs. Okay. What about the Hopewell? We're talking about the West. So would it be the Hopewell? No, because they're in the Mississippi. So it'd either be the Chumash or the Pueblo. Right, because we only talked about because we've talked about the Pueblo a bunch. That's the Pueblo. See, process of elimination. All right, on to France. Here we are. What was the name of the French explorer who sailed into the Gulf of St. Lawrence and deep into Canada? Just try. Yes, Jacques Cartier. It's French, so just don't pronounce most of it. That's my rule for French. Is just don't pronounce most of it. It's all like Southern English. Just mumble a lot of it, or slur it really. It's like yeah, that's right. Is that the only French I have on that page? Oh, we still have to do the English guy. Okay, well. That comes later, so I don't really have anything more for France, I don't think. Well, I'm going to throw this guy in here because I don't know where else to put him. What was the name of the German theologian who spoke out against the Pope and incidentally started the Protestant Reformation? Martin Luther. So that's start of chapter 2, so I don't really have the chapters spread out very well. I'm trying to keep things thematic, and it's not going very well. For England, and that'll be able to let me put this page away. Well, shit, not quite. Okay. Who sailed for the English in 1497, despite being from Genoa, to chart eastern Canada? So who was the first explorer for the English, who wasn't even English? Although the name we used is Anglicanized, so it sounds sort of English. The first name is extremely English. He's later. No, he was English. He was very English. Now, this is way before Sir Walter Raleigh. This is back in like early chapter 1. Or mid chapter 1. He showed up, was like, yep, there's land over here. It's for the English, and then left. And England didn't do anything for like 100 years. John Cabot. Which again was actually Caboto, but they just Anglicanized it, and that's what it's been in the history books basically ever since. But whatever. Let's go ahead and let's just go ahead and do this guy. Excuse me. What Englishman was most fervent about establishing a colony in Virginia, only to have the colony fail once and entirely disappear the second time? So he was real big on trying to set up colonies in North America, and the first time it didn't work, and the second time they got back and it was gone. Or the people were gone anyway. Yes. Weird that that's where we get North Carolina's capital from, as opposed to Virginia, even though he's the one that tried to settle in Virginia. But whatever, I don't make the rules. What was the name of the colony that he tried to found that famously disappeared? Roanoke. Okay. Um, I already just kind of did that up here, so we're not gonna worry about that. Okay, permanent settlements and the people who settled them, I guess. Okay. Um, well, I guess we can just start with this one so I don't have to keep looking at this. Easy one. What was the first permanent settlement in North America set up by England? Jamestown. For some reason, I didn't include St. Augustine, which is a shame because that was the first permanent settlement in North America, period. But I guess I just hate on the Spanish subconsciously. Um, Speaking of England, I guess I should have had this a little bit earlier, but it's alright. Um, who ruled England during the disastrous failure of the Spanish Armada? So who was running England when the Spanish Armada happened? Yes, Queen Elizabeth. Elizabeth the First. We'll never have another like her. Alright. Right, back to permanent settlements. What's the name of the French explorer who founded the permanent French settlement of Quebec? The first name is not difficult. I'll give you a pass on the last name. First name, just say it like you could say it in English. Unless you're looking at the wrong name. This was the guy that set up the French colony of Quebec. He set up the permanent colony. This wasn't the guy that failed to set up Quebec. This was the guy that successfully set up Quebec. There were two different guys, and I told you don't worry about the first guy. This was the one that actually successfully set up Quebec. You can try. That's exactly right. Samuel de Champlain. See, I like when y'all try. Even if it's not right, you can be... I mean, I just like to see how close you can get. And that one was how I say it anyway. So either you're right or we're both wrong. That's how I've always heard it. Okay, cool. I think that's it for these settlements. Acquisitions. I think we've only got the one. From what country did England acquire the land which will become New York? So which country had the land that England would eventually make New York? Yes. The Dutch or the Netherlands. Either works. Which, again, this one is multiple choice, so it doesn't really matter as long as you know that the Dutch are also the Netherlands. Alright. Economy. That's fun. Whoa, got way ahead of myself there. Let's try that again. What was the name of the English settler who pushed the Virginia colony towards sustainable cash crops? He was the guy that's like, hey, there's not gold laying around. We got to do something to make money. And this is Virginia colony as a whole. more or less Jamestown, but also just sort of the broader region. Yes, John Rolfe. Good. Um, and Virginia colony was not full of gold or other mineral riches. How did the English settlers make their money? So, John Rolfe was pushing them to grow cash crops. What specifically were they growing in Virginia? Tobacco. So tobacco worked for Virginia, but since we've got a lot of colony to spare, um, what crop was grown down in the West Indies once tobacco prices started to stagnate? Sugarcane. And just throw this out there for you guys. What can you make from sugarcane? Yep. Do you remember what it? Rum. And weirdly enough, my other class got to rum first. But do you remember the middle process? Like what you make? Well, technically, sugarcane, you turn it into this first, and then you either make it into refined sugar or rum. But there's this middle process where you melt down the sugarcane, molasses. So molasses was kind of this middle product that you could still just use like as a product, as like a sweetener sort of thing. If you've ever had molasses, it's not like syrup sweet. It's really not. It's almost, I wouldn't say tangy. It's got a real different taste to it. My grandfather liked to use molasses on his waffles or whatever, but it's got a different taste. It's not bad. It's different from what we're used to. And then as far as economic incentives, what country brought the first shipload of African-bound laborers to North America? Which is to say they were technically indentured servants at the time. But what country was the first to bring them over? Not the English. They got into it later. Wasn't the Portuguese. It was a major trading power. And this was one I couldn't find in the notes when I was briefly going through them. So I don't know where it is, but I know it's in there. Because I even had like images and stuff of the ship bringing them in. Let me see. Here we go. There we go. Okay. Yeah, it should be under tobacco fuels growth in North America. Which is under colonization and conflicts. I need to make sure it's there. Yes, it is in there. I'm not dumb. Okay, first boat of 20 Africans arrived in Jamestown aboard a Dutch ship. Okay, so it was the Dutch. Because it's real easy to go, okay, we're talking about slavery, and go to this one, but it's actually up here. Because again, it wasn't technically slavery yet. All right. I had to make sure that was in the notes, or I was going to lose my mind. Right, speaking of which, let's bring this back up. The Dutch. Oh, well, I guess technically the Netherlands, because I did ask what country. And I'll just go ahead and put this one down here because I don't want to go all the way back. Do it again. Who led a rebellion against the governor of Virginia over the treatment of indentured servants? Who led a rebellion against the governor of Virginia over the treatment of indentured servants? There's a whole slide on it. You don't need his first name. Yes. Nathaniel Bacon. Again, you don't need his first name. I just like typing it out for no reason. Okay. All right, we're setting up colonies. Just kind of a bunch of colonies here. Right, so let's start with Maryland. Who founded Maryland as a haven for Catholics persecuted in England? Who founded Maryland as a Catholic colony? Yep, Charles Calvert. I just remember him because that's a lot of C's and it goes with Catholic, so why not? I guess this is first. Yeah. What colony did the Pilgrims create north of Virginia? Like way north of Virginia, because they didn't mean to. Plymouth. I thought you said Portland for a second. Like, wrong side of the country. Plymouth, yeah. The Puritans arrived later and set up what town? It's kind of weird because it doesn't sound like some old colonial. Well, I mean, it sort of does because we hear about it with old colonial stuff, but like it's a modern day city. Yes. Because like you don't hear about Plymouth, you don't hear about Jamestown, but Boston is still very much active. Hmm? Yes, Puritans. Okay. not everybody got along with the Puritans, who was exiled from Salem and headed south to found Rhode Island. And again, this one is just stuck with me because I spent 2 years in Rhode Island, so this guy is like, yes, Roger Williams. And I have no idea where else to put this, so I'm just going to stick it here. I mean, it's another colony, but I don't know if this came before or after. I don't remember. Charles II had to repay some debts, gave land to the son of his friend, Admiral Sir William Penn. What was the land named? So it was named by William Penn Jr. So what did he call it? The whole colony. Yes. Just because that was the dude's last name. So it was Penn. So like, oh, let's just call it Pennsylvania. Which was more creative than just naming it town I came from. So, you know, it's a step. Meanwhile, over in England, they were having religious wars. Well, rulers and religion and everything. England had a civil war. Who fought and won against the English king on the side of the parliamentarians? Yes, Oliver Cromwell. There were a couple back and forth rulers. We get the Glorious Revolution, at which point who comes to power? I'm skipping the whole Charles II and James and annulment crisis and all that crap. After that, we get the Glorious Revolution, and they bring in who to be the new ruler. Specifically the king. I know the queen was there too, and they were joint rulers and all that, but specifically the king, because everybody liked him. Well, the Protestants liked him. It wasn't King Philip. That's a Spanish king. Typically was a Spanish king. This guy was from the Netherlands, famously. And the Dutch and the English loved him. I didn't give you guys that little bit of trivia about. No, that was Charles I's son. This was after Charles II. Well, after Charles II was his brother James, and this is after James. I know way more about English rulers than I do about, like, American politics. His guy, I like brought up way early on when we were talking about, like, Dutch forts and why they named certain things the way they did. And then he's here again. I was like, hey, this is the reason that we have this in the modern day. This is the guy that's the current. This is the reason he's the reason carrots are the way they are today. Remember that little story? Not King Henry. Oh, you don't have much time left. This is William of Orange, remember? He's the reason we have orange carrots. Because all the English and Dutch colonies were planting orange carrots. He's not the reason we have orange carrots. He's the reason that's the more common color of carrots, because carrots come in all sorts of colors. All right. We're almost done. Let's see if we can get this taken care of. What was the term for a country using tariffs to have more exports than imports? The economic system that caused a country to have more exports than imports. With using tariffs to have more exports than imports. It has to do with merchants, I guess. That's the best clue I can give you. Another really weird picture that looked like Mom from Futurama. The show's still on air. I can use those. I can use that as an example. Hmm? The point was the trade surplus, but it's a specific word. It's mercantilism. Somewhere. Hold on. TIL. I don't. I don't like I's in places where they're supposed to be, I guess. And since this is using tariffs, how did most colonists and people in general respond to the tariffs? Smuggling. I got that one. Alright, technically our time's up, but my other class doesn't typically show up until like right before 10. So if you guys want to stick around a few extra minutes to get this done, you're welcome to. If you gotta go, you gotta go. So do what you gotta do. So I'm just gonna keep going rapid fire if I can. What large native uprising in the Carolina colonies only turned around for the English after the Cherokee natives switched sides? There's a big native uprising in the South. We talked about two. The first one wasn't really named in the book, so this is the only one that was really named. No, that's in the West. Yeah, they're in like Arizona. This is a tribe we don't really talk about much anymore. The Yamasee War. Enslavement. What was the name of the transatlantic portion of a slave ship's journey during which many enslaved people died due to starvation, disease, or simply mistreatment? The part where they were being transported from Africa to North America. Have a good one. This was the uh, transatlantic portion of a slave ship's journey, during which many enslaved people died due to starvation, disease, or simply mistreatment. It's got a really simple name. It's like there was the journey from where they were captured in Africa, and then they were brought on the ship, and then there was a journey after they were brought to the Caribbean or America to where they eventually ended up. So the transatlantic portion was, I can't say much without giving it away because it's so simple. It was in between, I guess, the other parts. I don't know how to say it without giving it away. It was the infamous Middle Passage. Okay, this one, yeah, I don't know how to, hopefully you guys just know this one. The largest and most significant slave revolt within North America. We literally just talked about this today. The big slave revolt. Yes, the Stoner Rebellion. Alright, and just a couple more and we'll be done. The term for people that are not quite indentured servants, because they could live with their families but still work to pay off their passage. So these were indentured servants but not quite. Remember I had that list of like the Germans that were coming over that had the like high skilled jobs, not just farmers. They had a very specific term for them. No, that's a different group. That's actually, this group was taking jobs from them because this group was basically wasn't being paid. Yes, very good. Redemptioners. Because they were redeeming the cost of their journey over. It was 1700s, don't worry about it. Okay, 2 more questions. Where did Ben Franklin work as an apprentice? Like early on, initially, where did he work as an apprentice? Yep, Brothers Print Shop. And this last one isn't Ben Franklin, but I wanted to include it. What was South Carolina originally a colony of? That I brought up multiple times in this class. Because I thought it was neat. It wasn't a European country that came over and settled South Carolina. It was something else. Yes, Barbados. Barbados, a little Caribbean island. It's like, hey, there's some swampy, nasty land up here. That's perfect. All right, there will be extra credit throughout the short answers, and then some bonus at the end as well. And then, yeah, you guys will be good to go. So just check it out over the weekend, and I'll see you guys on Monday.
Has he been good in class?
Yeah.
He isn't struggling, right?
Nah.
Doesn't look distracted?
Nah. Been doing good. He did good answer. answering the study guide today, in fact.
No answer to Golden State Bridge.
No, no, did not. See you later.
You said somebody answered Golden State Bridge. You didn't specify a name. You didn't want to call them out.
Didn't want to call him out. Oh, I still got the stream on.